Hi. I actually came to Mary in '97, so probably you guys still in primary or kindergarten. So I think I can't remember your name. You spoke about social media earlier, and so when I first went to Mary, I learned about the internet and everything, but we don't know anything like it is now. So just if you can just talk about how social media has helped or hindered the coming out. Can you talk about the dual age nature of it?
So if I can just repeat the question just so we've understood it. You're from the time without social media, and things have changed since then, as we have now social media. And it's just basically if she has a view on how that's changed her interaction with the world.
How it's helped her process.
How it's helped her process.
I have the same questions and everything, but there wasn't a Google back then. Yeah, there wasn't alphabet stuff. Remember what that was?
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I understand what you're saying.
So 18 years forward, it's changed dramatically. So how
yeah.
Sure.
So as you say, I'm probably around the same year as you. So like basically 97, 98. Actually, I graduated in 98, a long time ago. But basically, I think when I was looking into Islam, for instance, I would ask people back then, like you said, there was no media, you didn't Google things, you researched things. You asked people, you asked the mosques, you asked people who knew better than you looked it up yourself, which is why I had a whole Bukhari series and all that stuff. I went and bought my own books of English translations, things like that. So yeah, there was no social media to there was none of that influenced me in saying, oh, okay, this is why this has happened or whatever it is. I'd say how can I put it? I think when my doubts came into play, I still wasn't really using social media to help me out on that. That was a very recent thing. I think a year and a half ago, when I discovered the ex-Muslim community, I then, joined. I went to an event as such, met people. I was terrified. I thought it's going to be like a cult. These people are going to be weird. They would have experienced such horrific things, and that's why they've left faith. And actually, I was really surprised at the level of intelligence. And there was lawyers, there was doctors, there was medical students, there was people who knew the Quran off by heart, people who'd preached, like you were saying earlier. But basically, that surprised me. Then I became part of the social media more, because then I joined the group on Facebook. And, that's where I've kind of now, I can seek support from that. I can air my views without feeling like, oh, I'm going to be attacked, or people are going to say this, that, the other about me. So I use that as my way of communicating or expressing myself. But prior to that, Facebook was just like, or Facebook, any social media. I mean, actually, I was probably one of the last people to go on Facebook. I still won't go on Twitter. I won't use Snapchat. I don't know none of that stuff. I don't even know how it works. I'm like, forget it. I'm just about using, Facebook. And it's more of a fun thing for me. My personal Facebook is fun. It's just check-ins here, there, whatever. Nobody really knows the real me on that, what I think, what I feel, who I am. But so I think it's been a really great support system for me. But back then, it was just more asking questions. And you do feel a bit isolated if you're thinking differently. You do feel like you're wrong. And actually, the story he said about exorcism, my cousin came round one day and said, you've got a jinn in you. Yeah? This jinn is not going to let go of you. I'm going to pray in your ear and I'm going to watch your reaction. And I said, stop being stupid. He held me down and prayed. Now, when someone's holding you down and you're scared, what do? You react. So I'm reacting, and he's thinking, I've got a jinn in me, and I'm like, get off me. So basically, I've gone through, there's so many stories I can tell you, stuff that's happened to me. But my family still think I've got a jinn in me. My sister's terrified of me sometimes. She's like, I'm not going anywhere with you at night, I'm scared of you. And I'm like, well, shut up, stop being ridiculous.
Thank you very much for sharing your stories. I'd like to ask you about your religious experiences other than the Islamic one. If you've had any. Perhaps you've experimented with non-Judeo-Christian Islamic type faiths, because they tend to be less theological and more towards self-development. I'm speaking about Taoism perhaps, or Buddhism, or yoga, and perhaps you could comment on that. Thank you.
Does anyone want to take it? Alia, do you want to take it?
I actually didn't really experiment that much with other faiths. After I left Islam, I actually experimented the most with Christianity. I started going to cathedrals, I listened to the choir, and I used to go in my jilbab as well. So they used to give me like biscuits and tea because they thought they could convert me, and it was quite nice. I was trying to think. I did actually kind of like start looking into Buddhism and Hinduism. I used to watch YouTube videos, and I tried to meditate, but I couldn't really concentrate. Like I couldn't let my mind go blank. So no, I mean, I never really got sucked into the idea of sort of spirituality outside of like, it's, you know, like the notion of like quite a solid religious foundation. I didn't really need to do that. I didn't feel lost. Actually, when I left Islam, I didn't feel lost. As a person, I felt very solid and quite grounded. And I actually focused a lot on philosophy and different moral arguments on how to be happy. You know, self-help books from you know, all sorts of different places. So I personally kept away from spirituality, but I did try it.
I think talking about spirituality, I did when I was progressive Muslim. I became a very Sufi in my. So if you're referring to spirituality, I did very much go into that, and I was very happy with that kind of religious view or that kind of Islam. But ultimately, it was basically a question of what's the truth? Do I actually know, as a matter of fact, whether God exists or doesn't exist, and is there any evidence for any kind of belief, any religion?
Hello, my question is for Sil. Well, first of all, I'd like to just thank you all for your story again. That's really good. You said that you considered carrying out attacks, and I wondered at the time looking back on what ideas you had in your head you think brought you closest to that. Just looking for some kind of insight as to your mindset at that time.
Actually, my question follows on from that. I'm actually interested, Sarah, to know how you were de-radicalised, and also you say you used to believe in God quite strongly, and now you take a position that you don't know. And I completely understand that position, but have you filled? Are you constantly in a state of I don't know, and you're fine with that, or have you kind of replaced the belief in a specific type of God with any kind of abstract notion of God or anything?
Okay, brilliant. So just to summarize that, so you've got two questions for you. One is when you were up in Wales training, please. What was the thinking process there? How did you get de-radicalized, as you said? And finally, in terms of your connection to higher power, what is your view now? I think that's a fair summary, isn't it?
Yeah. Okay. Answering the question from the question about the mindset I had when I was considering carrying out attacks. Basically, it all stems from a particular narrative. The narrative that the non-Muslims, the kuffar, are perpetual enemies of the Muslims, and that, you know, God says in the Quran, they will say they will say they're your friends, but they're lying, basically. They'll stab you in the back. So it was that kind of mentality, that kind of narrative that the West is at war with Islam. The fact that, it was the West is at war, and specifically the United States of America and the United Kingdom are at war with Islam. And by them declaring war on Islam and on Muslims, they've made themselves legitimate targets for attack. That was my line of thinking. Of course, I'm not saying that should be anyone's belief now. But it was from that narrative, and also what did play into it was the Iraq War and the Afghanistan War. I'm not making any comments on foreign policy, whether those were correct foreign policy decisions or not, but just kind of stating the fact that did have an impact on my thinking. However, my kind of thinking was there regardless of whether there had been an Afghanistan war or an Iraq war. It's just the entire narrative that the non-Muslims will try to destroy Islam, and that jihad is a religious duty for everyone, and that comes from within specific or the more literal kind of surface interpretations of the Quran and the Hadith being the other source of Islamic inspiration. With regards to the de-radicalization, how did I become de-radicalized? It's again, I refer you to Osama Hassan. Where's the speaker so I know where to look. Yeah, basically it's Osama Hassan. He's actually he's the Islamic scholar who's working with QMUL Foundation, the world's first counter-extremism think tank. And basically, actually, funnily enough, he was the imam at the mosque I used to attend from childhood. The same guy that basically came out and said, I accept evolution. And basically, he was originally Salafi. He fought with the Mujahideen in Afghanistan. And he then subsequently became de-radicalized and renounced his views. And kind of just looking at his acceptance of evolution and my questions regarding evolution and my kind of, interest in science, I guess our paths just kind of met. And I kind of looked at his works and his writings and, all of that stuff just made sense. Except the first step was accepting evolution. Once I accepted evolution, then, the doors were open to having a more progressive, kind of liberal interpretation of Islam. And when it comes to my kind of current thinking regarding religion and agnosticism, okay, basically, if you've got agnosticism here and you've got atheism here, I'm like right in the middle, like literally right in the middle. I'm like more atheist than most agnostics, and I'm more agnostic than most atheists. So I guess I don't kind of fit like a clear-cut kind of definition. I guess I would refer to myself as an agnostic atheist. And when it comes to kind of, I did at one point become deist, but that was kind of short-lived. I guess I find the idea of believing in a God acceptable. It does make sense to me. But at the same time, there's no evidence for the existence of God, so why would I believe in a God? And there's no convincing argument for the existence of God either, so yeah.
As an ex-Muslim woman myself, I know taking off the hijab was really difficult. So I think if you could talk about your story a bit about that, it might help our audience as well too. I appreciate
it. Just to get the question, you are an ex-Muslim woman yourself and you took off the hijab and it's difficult, so you just want her to elaborate.
Yeah, on how it was for you.
Okay.
Thank you.
It was really, really, really hard, actually. I started wearing a headscarf when I was about 11, and it all tied in with my school. I remember saying to my parents, I don't want to wear the headscarf. I'm not going to that school, I'm not wearing a headscarf, I'm not doing it. And they were like, don't worry, you don't have to wear a headscarf. Once I started the school, there was this entire thing about the status of being a Jamia girl, and once I became 11, 12, 13, and I was hitting that puberty, there was no way that I could not wear the headscarf. So I started wearing the headscarf and the jilbab, and I was uncomfortable with it over the years. I mean, I remember on Eid, because my family is not very religious, so my sisters don't wear headscarves. So I remember being like 13 on Eid, and I have to wear a green jilbab, and everyone's wearing like National Arkamis. So that kind of thing bothers you when you're growing up. I think the only period of my life where I was happy with my headscarf was when I became religious, when I was in Pakistan. At that point, I was like 18 or 19, so I spent a big chunk of my life unhappy with how I was dressed. And it comes to this idea of you feel really ashamed. I mean, if you try to explain to your parents or your school teachers that I don't want to wear the hijab, you might as well say, basically, I just want to be a whore. And that's how you feel. You feel like you have no right to say that. And I do know for a fact that Muslim women do choose to wear the hijab, but I do think, Salma Yaqub once said that it's an adult thing. And that's how I see the hijab as well. If you want to wear it, when you're a grown-up person, you make that decision. But 11, 12, 13-year-old, they're still children, their bodies are still developing, and you're plunging onto them all these notions of sexual kind of things associated with it. You have to cover your body because men might look at you, but don't look. Don't look. So even after I became an atheist, I still wore the headscarf. And I only took my headscarf off because I got really sick after I left Islam. I actually got cancer. And I was like, well, basically, my hair's going to fall out, so there's no point in wearing it, right? That's when I took it off. So I had that big chunk of coming out as an atheist, dealing with all this stuff with my family, still having to wear it because it was once you've taken it off, everyone's going to start asking questions. So, I mean, the headscarf is one of those things, it is really hard. Once you put it on, it's really hard to take it off for most girls. The pressure is really intense, and I don't think enough people talk about it.
One theme I've noticed across all of the speeches tonight is that of the consultation with literature to try and acquire knowledge. And I just wanted you to help me try and understand what it feels like emotionally to be consulted with a text that just completely contradicts everything you've ever been taught. Is it initially horrifying, or is it liberating from the start? How does that feel?
David, and I've got the members from the London Black Atheists.
Fantastic.
Wow, it was everyone was opened my eyes to the reality of what goes on in all the different communities. I want to thank you all for telling us your stories. And I want to thank you for giving us your trust in listening to what was going on. For my own personal, I can't speak for other members here, but for my own personal thing, I agree with you. I think it's not a political situation. I think it's a cultural thing, and I think that it's important that we get. I think it's fundamentally important to get Muslims re-engaged with their own history, with their own culture. Which means that they're being, like for instance, in the Victor and Albert Museum, they took down a painting from a Muslim artist from the 16th century. So there's a hell of a lot of hypocrisy within the Muslim and religious communities. How do you feel about that? Do you think that's most important? Because I don't like this UKIP fellow crawling from out of his rock, trying to take a. I don't like that. It's just taking.
Let's not get into politics.
I know. That's what I mean. I knew some of these people would turn up. Please, it's a cultural thing, and it's
sure.
And it's a community thing. I don't like this. Don't go to politics. It's not right.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so let's do these two questions first. So one question was around.
About religious literature.
Around religious literature, yes?
No, non-religious.
Non-religious literature. Okay, Alia, you take that?
So your question was essentially, when you are facing a text which goes against your religion. Right, I read The God Delusion when I was a teenager. And it is scary, but it is liberating. And it's exciting. It's really exciting. Because all your life you've been told that there's one way to think, and that's who you are, and that's who you'll always be. And essentially, when you're reading literature, which is with completely different points of view, it's a learning process. So as you get more and more educated, and even if you don't agree with it, if you don't even necessarily agree with all of Richard Dawkins' points of view or the way that he views religion, it's still you're learning more. So I found it exciting and liberating. And yes, it was scary to realize that there's something out there that I didn't know anything about.
Okay, brilliant. And the next question was about hypocrisy, I believe. I didn't fully quite get it. So, did one of you guys kind of quite get the question?
About the hypocrisy within the Muslim community.
The hypocrisy within the Muslim community.
Cultural issues.
I think we were talking about one part that I did get, and one part that I can kind of comment on or answer is the kind of engaging the Muslim communities with their own tradition. The thing that kind of got me de-radicalized is it was very profound what Majid Nawaz said is when he was kind of arrested in Egypt for being a member of Hizb ut-Tahrir, he studied the original texts, the original writings of the scholars of Islam, and he realized that all of the questions that we're discussing now regarding like human rights and whether stoning someone to death is right or keeping slaves is right, these questions were openly discussed by the scholars of Islam, many of the scholars from within the classical tradition. So it's kind of like over time, the kind of Islamic theological thinking has solidified and become vastly constricted. Whereas if you go back in time, you'd see that it was very fluid and very kind of vast. So yeah, I do think that would be a good thing to do.
Right.
Thank you for sharing your experiences, some amazing stories, and really emphasize with a lot of the situations that you guys have been through. And so I'm actually the opposite from you guys. I was actually born from a non-Muslim background and I accepted Islam. So I just wanted to give a sort of Muslim perspective. So first thing I want to say is everyone has the freedom of choice to decide whatever they want to believe. So we understand that. And as a Muslim community, we're here to help you and engage in a positive manner. So if you guys need any help, any sort of assistance, we're here to help you, right? We understand there's a lot of misconceptions that are out there in the Muslim community, a lot of things that have been done wrong. If you guys need any help, we're here to help you. So I just wanted to ask a question because all of your stories were slightly different, but they seem to have a common sort of theme in terms of you guys had some sort of issue or sort of subjective problem with certain things in Islam that you guys agree with, certain things that disagree with what you guys hold to believe to be true. But one thing I didn't hear in the sort of the conversations was a good sort of argument that denies, like a theological argument, that denies the existence of God. Your responses seem to be emotional or subjective.
Sure.
So I don't know if anyone wants to comment on that.
Okay, great.
Thanks. Sarah and Sahel, you talked about clinical depression, and I wanted to ask how widespread that was, because you obviously mentioned that you had family issues, and thank you for sharing. But I wonder, was it the kind of questioning your faith? I imagine that the family issues were what massively triggered the depression in the most part. Say if I'm wrong, but I wonder how much the questioning your faith led to issues with mental health, because I know from a Christian, well, not necessarily Christian background, it's not as strong. I imagine the Muslim community, the faith is a lot stronger, the identity is a lot stronger. So how strong were your issues with the faith in terms of your mental health issues, if you feel comfortable answering that?
Okay.
That was quite a mouthful, I do apologise.
Thank you very much. So let's do it in sequence. Gentleman at the back. I'll just mention something really quickly, which is, I think that's the wrong event. This event was very clearly about stories. Queen Mary University will have 1 billion theological discussions about the foundations of why God does or does not exist. This was very much about experiences. One can have an event LGBT, like about why people are gay, the scientific basis. That's a very, very different thing to, hey, I'm gay, this is my experience coming out. They're very different things. So we didn't really come here to tackle the question, and of course we didn't answer that, because that's not what we're looking to communicate here. Would anyone like to?
I just think that, for me personally, I was disowned by my parents. My parents chose religion over me. And almost lots of Muslims I've talked to have said that they would do the same. And for me, that does not suggest that Muslims are willing to accept us, which is why we're doing the event, just to promote, we're here, there's lots of us. It's not something wrong. And that's what, like you say, you're willing to accept us. Have you got any children? I mean, how would you feel if your daughter decided to leave? Would you react? I'm hoping that now you've heard our stories, that you wouldn't react the same way my parents did.
I'm not a born Muslim, so...
I know, but you still believe in Islam. I don't think that it doesn't matter whether you're born into the community or not. Islam is very much, Muslims tend to want their children to believe in Islam. And
We also believe in freedom of choice, so everyone has a choice to believe whatever they want. There's a specific ayah in the Quran that says there's no compulsion in religion. So when you reach an age of adult, you believe that you have the freedom of choice.
That's fantastic. So if your children leave, I mean, it'd be great if you can kind of support them, because that's what we needed.
That's what we needed, and we didn't
Fantastic.
get that. That's what we're trying to promote.
Okay.
I think that's the only comment I can make. So I'm not trying to attack you or anything, but I think hopefully I I hope you mean what you're saying, but I don't think a lot of Muslims actually, they would say that, but they don't actually believe it, unfortunately. Because the Quran doesn't allow it. At the end of the day, that's where the contradiction comes in. It's
on the one hand you're accepting, on the one hand be accepting, everybody has freedom of choice. Turn a few pages and it's saying, they're kuffars and they're disbelievers and God has put a stone on their
Kill
heart.
them where they stand.
They're never going to see. And those are the things that lead you to questioning God, because you're like, if God is the one who's put a stone on my heart and God is the one who's blocked me so I won't see and I won't hear anymore because I'm a disbeliever, then what kind of God is this? And that's where it comes in. Yeah, there's no evidence for a God or no God. I'm not going to get into that really, but these were sort of the pathways I think a lot of us have experienced the same way. And it's all come from the Quran. All of my doubts, all of my answers, all of my questions, everything has come from the Quran. Simple as that. I've seen it in black and white. And if something has to be so open to interpretation and that complicated, I mean, I don't know. Again, why can't God just make it black and white and simple? I don't know. If my children are going to burn in hell, there's just a lot of things I'm very uncomfortable with. My best friend is Hindu, and her mum is the most kindest person I've ever known. She's more kind than any Muslim woman I've met. And the thought of saying that she's going to be in hell and I should be happy in heaven, saying, "Oh, you were a disbeliever," I can't do that for me personally. So, I don't need the evidence that God is out there or not. I personally am not going to believe in somebody like that. And if I do meet a God and there is a God, punish me. I don't care.
Okay, thank you. Let's move on to the question about clinical depression. Sohail, would you like to take that one?
What was the question again?
it was about how. Shall I?
Oh yeah. Now it's coming back to me. Sorry. Basically, now it's just gone again.
It was.
Could you quickly summarize it?
How much a part of your depression was? How much of it was owing to your issues with your faith?
With me, I would actually say my problems started in 2010, the fateful year. Basically, when I was doing my A2 exams, it wasn't because of the exams. It was because specifically at that time, I had like a doubt about Islam, and that doubt terrified the hell out of me, because I was certain that if this doubt stayed with me, I wasn't Muslim anymore. And if I wasn't Muslim, if I wasn't sure in my belief, if I wasn't certain, if I didn't have this belief, I was going to burn in hell forever and ever. Now, imagine that thought, that you're going to burn in hell forever and ever and ever. That was actually the cause of all of my... There was other stuff happening as well, but it was actually that doubt in religion that caused the mental health problem. That was the primary cause.